The alert came too late. The distress signal had screamed into the void, bouncing across systems, flagged, logged, reviewed, and approved. By the time Commander Arlen stepped onto the ruined platform, the story had already ended. Smoke still drifted through the air. Emergency lights flickered weakly, casting broken shadows across metal walls. His tactical visor filled with data, 12 heat signatures, all cold, no movement, no resistance. His unit had expected raiders, smugglers, maybe a fast strike for supplies. That was the standard pattern. This was not standard. This was something else. Something worse. The scanners kept feeding him numbers. Burn marks on the walls. Impact points clustered too tightly. Blood patterns spread low across the floor. Arlen didn't need the analysis, but he forced himself to look anyway. These weren't fighters. These weren't soldiers. The data confirmed it, with cruel certainty. Civilian biometrics. Small bodies, no armor, no weapons, families, children. The realization hit harder than any explosion ever had. His jaw tightened, his hands curled into fists inside his gloves. He was too late, and he knew it. Then one of his officers spoke, voice unsteady. "Commander, there's one more reading." Arlen turned. At the far end of the corridor, near what used to be a shelter room, a faint life signal blinked. Barely there. They moved fast. Inside the room the damage was worse. The walls were chewed apart by gunfire. The floor was dark with blood. And there, in the doorway, lay a single figure, a human woman. She was on her back, arms spread wide, as if she had chosen that spot on purpose. Behind her, pressed into the corner, were 5 alien children, small, shaking, alive. The medical scan ran automatically. 43 bullet wounds, some clean through, some still inside her body. Broken ribs, collapsed lung, massive blood loss. The numbers kept scrolling, each one colder than the last. Her body had done something impossible. It had stopped bullets, not all at once, but over time. She had stood there and refused to fall. The children behind her were covered in her blood, their small hands clutching her clothes. They hadn't moved. Even now they stayed where she had left them, as if she was still protecting them. "She did this?" Arlen asked quietly. "Yes, sir," the officer replied. "All attackers neutralized. She took down 11 no combat implants, no training records. What was she, a teacher? She worked here? Early childhood care?" Arlen stared at her face. Her eyes were still open, brawn focused, calm in a way that didn't make sense. One hand still gripped a rifle, far too heavy for her frame. The children had tied strips of cloth around her arm, a poor attempt to stop the bleeding. They had tried to save her. His chest tightened. "How long?" he asked. The medic checked the timeline. She was wounded at first contact. She held them off for 39 minutes. Continued fighting for 26 minutes after a fatal injury. Rescue could have arrived in 17 minutes. That was the difference. 17 minutes lost to delay, to procedure, to waiting for clearance. 17 minutes while a woman stood in a doorway and decided that she would not move, no matter the cost. "Evacuate the children," Arlen said. His voice was steady, but it took effort. "Get them medical care, full support." He looked down at the woman again. "And prepare honest. She died protecting them. She deserves recognition." No one argued. Later, alone, Arlen reviewed the footage. It showed a normal morning. The woman laughing, the children eating, arguing over food, playful and loud. Then the door exploded inward. The first shot hit her shoulder. She didn't scream. She didn't freeze. She moved. She pushed the children behind her and picked up the fallen weapon without thinking. The footage showed her firing, missing, firing again, getting hit, falling, standing back up, minute after minute, blood pooling at her feet. At one point, her legs failed and she dragged herself upright using the doorframe. She kept firing. At minute 36, the weapon clicked empty. She looked down once, then turned and threw herself backward, covering the children with her body. The last shots followed, then silence. Seconds later, Arlen's unit burst in, efficient and perfect. Too late. The final frame froze on her face as she looked toward the camera. She smiled, tired, broken, victorious. Her lips moved. The audio belly caught it. "They're safe," she whispered. Then the signal flatlined. The children survived. All 5. They grew. They remembered her. They spoke her name as if it meant safety itself. One became a leader, another a healer. Arlen carried her image with him wherever he went. A reminder. A wound that never closed. The galaxy would later argue about humans, about their strength, their aggression, their strained resilience. But Arlen knew the truth. Humans didn't protect others because they were ordered to. They didn't do it because it made sense. They did it because, when the moment came, it stepped forward anyway. And sometimes, that was enough to change everything. The warning light had stopped flashing by the time Captain Ives reached the station. Power was unstable. Gravity flickered on and off like a tired heartbeat. The silence was wrong. The stations were never silent. Not like this. His boots echoed as he moved through the main corridor, the sound too loud, too lonely. His HUD filled with damage reports, hull breaches sealed too late, oxygen levels restored too late, life sign 0. He had come expecting pirates. Maybe a failed deal. Maybe a short fight. That was the usual story. This wasn't usual. This was aftermath. The scans didn't lie. Bodies lay where they had fallen. No weapons in their hands. No armor. Medical tags identified them quickly. Engineers, dock workers, families who lived on the lower rink, children. The numbers stacked up in neat, cruel columns. Ives felt heat rise in his chest, sharp and bitter. He had followed protocol. He had waited for confirmation. Now the cost of that waiting was spread across the floor in blood and broken metal. Captain, someone said quietly. We found something. A single life sign? Weak. Almost gone. They followed it to the station's hydro bay. Plants floated loose in the air, roots torn from their beds. Water globes drifted slowly, reflecting emergency lights. In the center of it all lay a man, human, on his knees, slumped forward, arms wrapped around a small alien child. The child was alive, crying softly. The man was not moving. Medical scans ran. 31 wounds, blade, energy burns, blunt force. His spine shattered, organs failing. And still, his arms had locked in place, holding the child close. The data showed it. Clearly he had taken every strike meant for the smaller body. Every one. He fought them alone. Ives asked. Yes, sir, the officer replied. Killed none, no combat history. Who was he? A gardener, maintained the hydro systems. Ives stared. The man's face was swollen, bruised, almost unrecognizable. What his expression was calm, focused, like someone who had already accepted the end. The child clung to his shirt, small hands tangled in fabric, refusing to let go. How long did he last? 28 minutes after first injury. Help could have arrived in 9 minutes. 9 minutes that would follow Ives for the rest of his life. Get the child out, he ordered. Now. His voice faltered despite himself and logged this. Full honest. I don't care what the book says. Later, Ives watched the footage. It began with routine work. The man humming softly as he trimmed plants. The child sitting nearby, watching, asking questions. Then the doors blew open. The man turned. No hesitation. He grabbed the child and ran. He hit. He fought. He screamed in pain and kept going. When he couldn't stand, he crawled. When he couldn't crawl, he stayed where he was and made himself a wall. The final seconds showed the attackers leaving, assuming both were dead. The man shifted once more, pulling the child tighter, sheltering them with the last strength he had. His lips moved. The audio corded faintly. Stay quiet, you're safe. The child survived, grew older, learned what that moment meant. Ives never forgot the name on the gardener's badge. He carried it with him, a reminder burned deeper than regret. People would later ask why humans were feared, why they were respected. Ives knew the answer. It wasn't their weapons or their ships. It was moments like this, when there was no reason to stand, no reward for staying, and no hope of survival if humans still chose to protect. And that choice changed everything. The emergency gate finished opening just as Commander Holly arrived. The signal had gone quiet, minutes earlier. Too quiet. The outpost hung in space like a broken tooth, lights dim, hull scarred, air leaking in thin white streams. Holly stepped inside with his team, the smell hitting first. Burnt metal, smoke, blood. His visor lit up with alerts. Structural damage, internal fires, no hostile movement. He had expected a fight still in progress, maybe a last stand. Instead, he walked into what was left behind. The main hall was littered with bodies, not soldiers. No armor, no weapons. The scans labeled them instantly. Refugees, displaced families housed temporarily while waiting for transport, elderly, children. The numbers climbed higher the longer he looked. Too many. Parlay swallowed hard. His chest felt tight. He had delayed launch for confirmation. Just a few more checks. Now those minutes lay scattered across the floor, silent and unmoving. Commander, his lieutenant said, voice low. There's a signal, faint. We're Medica wing. They moved fast. Inside the wing, beds were overturned, walls scorched. The life sign pulsed weakly behind a collapsed door. They forced it open. On the other side was a woman, human, slumped against a bed, arms locked around two small alien children. One was unconscious. The other stared wide-eyed, frozen in fear. The woman's back was torn apart. Deep burns, shrapnel wounds, blood soaked into the floor beneath her. The medical scanner chimed 48 injuries, severe trauma. Severe trauma. No chance of survival. And yet her heart had kept beating far longer than it should have. Her body had been positioned perfectly, angled to shield the children from the doorway. Every hit had landed on her instead of them. She fought. Hallie asked. Yes, sir. Security logs show she activated the lockdown. held this room alone. Training none, she was a translator, assigned here 3 weeks ago. Hallie looked at her face. Pale, sweaty, her eyes were half open, unfocused but calm. One hand still clutched a broken stun baton, but the children pressed into her sides. Small bodies shaking. They trusted her, even now. How long did she last? The medic checked 34 minutes after first injury. Rescue could have arrived in 14 minutes. 14 minutes of delay. 14 minutes where she chose to stay. Get the children out, Hallie said softly. Careful. He paused, then added, logger actions, full recognition. Later, Hallie reviewed the recordings. The footage showed chaos. Screaming, people running, the woman ushering families towards safety, shouting directions in multiple languages. Then the attackers broke through. She slammed the medical wing doors shut and stayed behind. The first blast threw her across the room. She got up anyway. She dragged the children under cover. She stood in the doorway and didn't move. Minute after minute passed. She was hit again and again. She fell. She crawled back. At one point she couldn't stand anymore, so she sat upright, back to the bed, arms spread, making herself as wide as possible. The attackers eventually moved on, assuming the room was cleared. In the final seconds of footage, she looked down at the children. Her lips moved. The audio barely caught it. Don't be scared, she whispered. I've got you. They lived. Both of them. Years later, they would tell the story again and again. About the human who stayed. Holly kept her name on a small plaque in his quarters. He looked at it often. People asked why humans were everywhere, why they were always involved. Hallie knew the answer. When things broke, when systems failed, when time ran out, humans didn't leave, they stayed. And sometimes, that was the only reason anyone survived. The rescue shuttle locked onto the station with a dull thud. Lieutenant Sarah was already moving before the ramp fully lowered. The distress call had cut out mid-sentence. That alone was bad. What waited inside was worse. The air was stale, heavy with smoke and something metallic that clung to the back of the throat. Emergency lights pulsed red, slow and tired. Her visor filled with reports as she ran. No active hostiles, internal damage severe, life signs almost. None. She'd expected chaos, maybe a running battle. Instead she found silence, the kind that only comes after everything is over. The first bodies were near the docking ring, unarmed, no uniforms. Cargo workers, station staff, families who lived close to the ports. The scans identified them instantly. Too instantly. Ages, species, causes of death. The numbers stacked up faster than she could process them. Sarah felt a sharp twist in her chest. She had followed protocol, who waited for clearance, who waited for backup. Now the cost of that waiting lay motionless at her feet. Lieutenant, a voice crackled in her ear. We've got a signal very weak. We're maintenance level. Section C. They descended fast. The lower levels were worse. Narrow holes, scorched walls, debris everywhere. The signal led them to a maintenance closet. Its door bent inward. Sarah forced it open. Inside, the space was barely big enough to stand. A human man was slumped against the far wall. In front of him, wedged between tool racks and his own body, were 3 small alien children, alive, terrified, silent. The medics. Scanner chirped softly. 27 injuries. Severe blood loss. Internal damage. The man shouldn't have been conscious. He barely was. His arms were wrapped around the children, locked in place. Muscles seized from pain and effort. Every mark on his body lined up with the doorway. He had made himself the shield. He did this alone, Sarah asked, her voice low. Yes. The medic replied. Killed or drove off 8 attackers. No combat record. Who was he? Station mechanic. Night shift. Sarah looked at his face. Bruised, bloodied, one eye swollen shut, the other open just enough to track movement. When he saw the rescue team, his shoulders sagged slightly, as if something inside him finally let go. How long? She asked. The medic checked timestamps. He was injured at first contact. Held them off for 31 minutes. Risio could have arrived in 7 minutes. 7 minutes that would never stop echoing. Get the kids out. Sarah ordered now. She knelt in front of the man. You did good, she said softly. Later, she watched the footage. It showed the mechanic doing routine checks, the children following him, asking questions, laughing. Then alarms, shouting. The first attacker appeared in the hall. The man didn't run. He grabbed the children and pushed them into the closet. When the door wouldn't close properly, he stood in front of it instead. The footage was brutal. He was hit, fell, got back up, used tools as weapons, threw himself forward again and again. At one point, his leg failed and he dragged himself the last step back into position. He never left the doorway. Not once. In the final seconds, the attackers retreated, believing the area cleared. The man slid down the wall, still holding the children close. His lips moved. The audio barely caught it. It's okay, he whispered. I'm here. The children survived. or 3. They would remember the mechanic who smelled like oil and metal and safety. Sarah recorded his name in the official report, then again in a private log. She never deleted it. People liked to talk about human courage as if it were loud or dramatic. Sarah knew better. Sometimes it was quiet. Sometimes it was a man standing in a doorway, broken and bleeding, deciding that if something terrible was going to happen, it would happen to him first. And that choice, made in the dark, saved lives.